Hello, hello, welcome, please come in. Our shopping-only runs continue today in Final Fantasy VI. So, while the intro fights, in which I have no real control over anything, play out, let's remind everyone of the rules. In this run, I may only use equipment, consumables, etc. that I purchased for some form of currency. This will be a bit murky right at the start, as I can't change equipment and don't start with access to any stores, so at least for a bit I'm just gonna have to play through the game relatively normally. After committing some light war crimes, it's time for Locke to show up, and a bunch of Moogles that all happen to be here. In the interest of keeping this as close to the rule set, I do immediately unequip Locke and Mog, and rely exclusively on the Moogles for this fight. Since I can't change their equipment, this makes using them fair game, I guess. Listen, we're almost accessing a shop. With Terra rescued, it's over to Figaro Castle, where I finally have access to some shopping. First item on my list is selling my entire inventory, then buy some tools for Edgar to use and some consumables to help with healing. Then run around the castle, chatting with people, before hopping back to talk to Edgar. Kefka shows up, commits a war crime, and it's time to bail via Chocobo. There is a required fight here, but good news is Edgar has tools and Terra has magic, which is quite useful. Oh, just like FF2, enemies sometimes drop items, but don't worry, I will be noting these down to sell later. Into South Figaro Cave, which has a convenient free healing point, and next I reach South Figaro, which means I can finally buy some actual gear for my party. Yay! Basic defensive gear and weapons! Huzzah! And now it's time to climb Mount Colts. Huh, these mammoths are kind of tough to deal with, huh? Back to South Figaro to heal, let's try Mount Colts again! And it's next boss time, against Ipu. And wow, do these bears hit really hard. My healing is pretty limited here, with potions being worthless and cure being fine, but not great. Especially when Terra doesn't actually have that much MP to heal with. My damage is better though, and I can mostly survive by just making basic attacks. That leads into the Sabin portion of the fight. This is more a story battle where I really just need to survive and use Raging Fist when prompted to do so. Except then I die due to an unfortunate gale winds. Let's just do that one more time, but better. There we go. With Sabin in the party, I can head to the Returner's headquarters, which unfortunately doesn't have any shops to replace Sabin's equipment. That's probably fine, I'll buy him some stuff later. I will go ahead and buy some high potions while I'm here. Item healing is pretty bad in this game, but it's what we've got, at least for now. Anyway, agree to help the Returners, sell the shiny item they gave me. I can't unequip Bannon, so he gets to keep his equipment. Good news is all the enemies in this river are hurt a lot by fire, for some reason. And Aura Cannon on Sabin is good even without a weapon equipped, which is very funny. And once that's all done, it's time to face down the next boss, Ultros. And this fight is not very difficult. Bannon can heal the entire party every turn for free. Oh, Sabin died. Good thing I brought some Phoenix Downs. Anyway, that is Ultros defeated, which is very good, because he hits very hard. And now it's time for the party to split up. I will be in control of Locke first, who has to run around, stealing clothes and other items. The other items are going to get sold as soon as I can, and I do at least have access to the shops. Other than messing up the whole sequence because I was clicking too fast, this is pretty easy and leads to releasing Celeste. And thankfully, I preemptively purchased some gear for her so she wouldn't be lacking in equipment. She also has innate magic access, which is very nice. Back into South Figaro Cave, and it's time for the boss, the Tunnel Armor. And this fight is a little tricky. My party is not as durable as they should be, and my healing is lacking. It's really up to Celeste to both heal the party and stop the Tunnel Armor's magic with Runic, while Locke deals as much damage as he can. This goes well enough to win the fight. And we're over to Sabin's story. First up, it's to the shop to buy 50 shuriken for Shadow to throw, which should be very helpful. Then to the Imperial camp, then over to Cayenne for a duel that is made way harder than it should be because Cayenne has no equipment. Good news is the Sabin and Shadow sequences are way easier. Sabin and Shadow have actual equipment, and shuriken deal pretty good damage. Then there are some war crimes. I really wish Sabin had a weapon. Hopefully someday I'll be able to buy some decent claws. Anyway, more fights to try and escape the Imperial camp, and the Magitech armor really makes this easier. Good damage and good healing. No idea why they leave the armor behind. Back to the shop to buy some healing items and stock back up on shuriken, just as a precaution, and it's on to the train. The fights here are pretty dangerous, and way too resource intensive to fight too many times, so I will be running most of the time. Good news is that at the end I can suplex the train, then just throw a Phoenix down at it to actually end the fight. At the waterfall, Shadow bails, which is understandable, but also a bummer because shuriken were dealing really good damage. The fights down the waterfall are pretty easy though. Cayenne may not have a weapon, but even his unarmed attacks deal okay damage, which is kind of surprising. In Mobliz, I can sell all the items I picked up on the train, and finally, finally buy a sword for Cayenne and claws for Sabin. And some other better equipment. Huzzah, my party is no longer woefully undergeared. In the shop here, I buy some dried meat and it's out onto the veldt. Because I can recruit Gao here. Mostly to advance the story. I'm not actually going to use Gao because I find unlocking his rages to be annoying. I do pick up a brief handful for the period of time where you have to use Gao, and then it's into this cave, grab a diving helmet, and it's time to ride a river. A sequence easily solved by turning on the auto battle command and walking away to make a cup of coffee. Huzzah! Nakia has some more shops to buy some weapons and armor, also some relics I can pick up that should be quite useful. And that means one more sequence remains, the Terra sequence, which is really just finishing up that boat ride from earlier. Between crossbow, prey, and fire, this is a big nothing sequence. Back in Narshe, the locals won't talk to us because of the war crime, so it's time to sneak through the caves and chat with them anyway, I guess. And party is all back together just in time for an Imperial attack on Narshe. Okay, party building time. Which is pretty easy. There is a clear best party here. Then carve a path directly to Kefka. Terra, Edgar, and Sabin focus on attacking, while Celeste uses Runic every turn to ensure Kefka can't actually use any of his magic. This fight remains as easy as ever, thank you very much team. Then the Esper here starts to glow, then Terra glows and it's time to chase after her. So put together a party, same party as before, but with Terra gone, I guess Gao is the next best person to join the squad. The shops in Narshe also have a lot of nice new gear to stock up on, including some fun new accessories. Ride Figaro Castle all the way to Kalingen, then south to Jador, which also has some very nice new equipment to continue to stock up the party. And it's into the terrible town of Zozo. Here it's a long climb up to the next boss, Dadaluma, and this fight is easy as ever. He tries to heal, which is annoying, and he summons help, which is irrelevant, and then he dies. Because this fight is always a joke. Up here, I find Ramu and Terra, and it's time for our first batch of Magicite. That I can't use. Yeah, Magicite is equipable, and none of these were purchased. So, no Magicite, no magic, no stat buffs. That may compound into a problem, we'll have to see. Fun fact, I did actually try to leave without even picking up the Magicite, but you are required to do so I'll just never actually equip any of it. Time to form a new party, drop Gao for Locke because the story demands it, and it's time for the opera. Here, Celeste disguises as the opera virtuoso and a ploy to attract the attention of known kidnapper Setzer. But Ultros, who is also a creep, plans to do crime. So I need to fight some rats through the power of crossbows and fire. Hopefully my healing stocks are enough to get me through this. These rats hit pretty hard, actually. Okay, boss fight time. Ultros is weak to fire, so Sabin can deal big damage with Rising Phoenix. Which is good, because Ultros also hits pretty hard, and my only healing is a small stockpile of high potions, which are already not healing as much as I would like. There we go! Opera saved, Celeste kidnapped, Setzer recruited. Time to take this fight to the Empire, but first there are a lot of very nice items to buy in the towns around here, so it may be time to do a little bit of grinding to get the gil I need to buy all the shiny new equipment. And it turns out that gear is in fact quite expensive, so this may take a bit. Whose idea was it to put 3 different towns all next to each other, all with shiny new gear to buy? How am I to afford all this nonsense? Okay, that's done. I bought all the things I really needed and some healing items for safety. Now I can finally head to Vector, because it's time to sneak into the Magitech factory. So many good treasures here, and I can't grab them, and that makes me very sad. Very, very sad. And it's next boss time, Ifrit, who is immune to every element except ice, which is unfortunate. Celeste can technically cast Blizzard, but I need to have her use Runic to have a chance at surviving. Meanwhile, Shiva is immune to every element except fire, which I also can't really do. So while Celeste uses Runic to stop attacks, I need to have Sabin using Raging Fist as aggressively as possible. And wow, that was closer than I expected, but I did manage it. Ifrit and Shiva turn into Magicite that I can just leave on the floor and head over to my next boss, number 24. This boss has a variable elemental barrier, except that doesn't matter because Aura Cannon is dealing 1200 damage per use. So, as per usual, the boss dies before its main mechanic even comes into play. Then I get 6 more useless Magicite before Celeste leaves the party, and now it's a little bit of a problem section, because I have no healing anymore, and I have to go through a gauntlet of fights on a rail car. I can't access the menu at all between these fights. Sabin is strong enough to end most of these in one Rising Phoenix, but the chip damage enemies get in before that happens is not great. Then it's another boss fight against number 128. This boss has 2 arms that Sabin can mostly keep dead. However, the boss also has Slow to cast on my characters, and Haste to cast on itself. Good thing Blitz abilities are as strong as they are, and good thing I bought some high potions to keep my party topped off. With that fight handled, it's now time to flee the Imperial capital, which means another fight against Grabby Hands. Setzer joins the party here, not that he is particularly useful, and because this is a pincer attack, I can't just Rising Phoenix down both cranes. Instead, Locke and Setzer are in charge of high potion usage, while Edgar attacks and Sabin uses Aura Cannon some more. I don't have a ton of high potions, but I have just enough to get me through. Back in Zozo, we get to hop into a long sequence in which nothing challenge relevant happens, and then Terra is back to normal, which is good, because I need someone who can actually heal in this party. I also now have access to the airship, which means a few important things. First, I can head back to Zen to purchase the Seraph Magicite from this shady dude. This is one of the few Magicite that can be purchased and will give me access to some decent support magic, which is essential. Expanding healing access to not just Terra should be very useful. Next up, it's over to Jadur, where the auction house is open, and as you might expect, there are 2 more Magicite for me to buy. Golem gives Protect and Stop, which honestly aren't the most useful, and it's also a second source of Cura, and finally Zone Seeker, which has Osmos, so MP will never be an issue again, and it gives +2 magic on level up, which is incredible. And that's kind of all I can do to prepare, so it's back to Narshe to talk to Bannon. Here I can also recruit Mog, who has a decent attack in the form of the Dance Command. And none of the rest of the party is that exciting to me. So it's Terra, Edgar, Sabin, and Mog heading to the Sealed Gate Cave. And yeah, turns out instant death is pretty good here. And then nothing else interesting happens. At the end of the dungeon is a lengthy cutscene and a bunch of Espers fly out and cause a little bit of trouble. And no more airship for me. And then it's time for long political meetings with the Emperor. Interesting in a casual playthrough, not interesting at all in this challenge. Also, the rewards for doing well at this are not helpful or even usable, because bought in political goodwill is not shopping, especially when the Emperor is lying anyway. Anyway, we're going to help, which means I need to catch a boat to Tamasa. The shops here have a few new weapons and some new armor that's fairly useful. In fact, I probably should have saved up some money grinding before doing the banquet scene, but that's okay, it should be fine. Anyway, in the night, a building lights on fire, for some reason, and Terra and Locke must team up with Strago. As in the no magic run, Strago is going to be very useful here, because while most characters have fairly limited ability sets, lures are very versatile and very strong, and you better believe I will be making use of them. First up is to swap out all this equipment, and then it's to navigate this fire. And Strago is very good here, having access to Aqua Breath, which can pretty easily take out entire formations in a single use, and at the end is the really struggle portion of the dungeon, the Flame Eater. Locke has Cura and can do a decent job of keeping the party healed up while Terra attacks the Flame Eater, and Strago deals with the ads. The fight isn't free by any means, you really should have Blizzara here, and while Locke has Cura, he doesn't have a ton of magic to make the most of it. But after one brief death from Strago, the Flame Eater drops. The fight is over, and the party is okay. And with Strago now in the party, it's into Esper Cave. Terra also learned Fire via level up, which should be very useful, and it's next boss time. Ultros, again. Transfira deals over 3,000 damage, which is very nice. Strago is sadly limited to defense, as his only offensive spell is Aqua Breath, which Ultros absorbs. That being said, it's still fine. Terra is dealing enough damage with Fyra for the entire party, and then Realm shows up and I just need Sketch to succeed to end the fight. And it only takes 2 tries, which is great. Normally that takes way longer to get that to work. And now it's time to bail, head back to Tamasa and sell all of Realm's equipment, and then buy new stuff. Then back into the cave to join up with the Espers who agree to stop wrecking things, which immediately bites them in the butt when we head back to Tamasa and are instantly betrayed. So, with Kefka having a bunch more Magicite and me having my airship back, I guess a continent is flying now. Good news is I can assemble my own party. Before I head to the floating continent, it's time for a few side quests. First, it's back to the Esper Cave, because in theory, these stupid Venobenus can use White Wind. The wiki says they always use it on turn 3. That doesn't seem to be true, and it takes several fights to get them to use it. It seems that actually they use it on turn 3, but only if both Venobenus are still alive, I think? Anyway, White Wind is stupidly strong, and will stay the strongest healing option I have, basically forever. Okay, now it's floating continent time. Sadly, I have to limit myself to 3 characters, for reasons the game never really justifies. Sabin for damage, with Celeste and Strago providing support. This section is honestly less dangerous than it is kind of tedious. It's basically just a gauntlet of fights. And while I can access the menu between fights, the trade-off is having to wait for each new fight to start, which takes just a little bit longer than it probably needed to. Oh well, at least Aqua Breath and Rising Phoenix deal way too much damage, and eventually Ultra shows up. He is still weak to fire, so he takes huge damage from Rising Phoenix. After a few hits of that, Typhon is added to the fight. Typhon absorbs fire, but I can still just spam Rising Phoenix until Ultros is dead, then switch to Aura Cannon and Aqua Breath to absolutely wreck Typhon. This immediately leads into another boss fight against the Air Force. Aqua Breath and Rising Phoenix deal good damage and take out both of its secondary parts. Celeste is relegated to healing duty while Sabin and Strago destroy the boss. And on the floating continent, we get the dualistic reason why I could only bring 3 characters. Shadow is here and becomes the 4th character. Good news is, Shadow is actually quite good. So, navigate the flying continent before briefly bailing back to the airship. That lets me fly back over to Kefka to buy some throwable scrolls, because these deal great damage and I will need them so Shadow can contribute. Which he will need to, because the next boss is Ultima Weapon, who loves to talk about how strong it is. Fortunately, my party is also quite strong, with Water Scrolls, Aura Cannon, and Aqua Breath all hitting very hard. Strago does sometimes have to take a break to use White Wind, but that's really it. Ultima Weapon's basic attacks aren't that damaging, and its spells are mostly mitigated by Runic. Weird that Runic doesn't work on Flare. And it's dead. So maybe its considerable strength was a bit exaggerated. Anyway, Kefka has ultimate power and it's time to bail. Kefka does try to send forces to stop me, but they are all very murderable. Yeah, I should probably wait. Shadow deals pretty good damage with scrolls. I might need him in the final act. So we wait, and wait, and wait, and finally Shadow shows up. Then only good things happen. Cough. And it's time for a fishing minigame, if it can even be called that. Whee! And it's time to raft away. And it's a strong start, with Albrecht having a bunch of very good equipment to buy. If only I had the money. So, time to get some money. Honestly, I'm just gonna get enough for the Gigas Ring and Flame Tongue. There is more to buy, but it will be faster and easier soon. North in the next town to run through the Crumbling House dungeon to rescue a small child. This gets Sabin back in the party, which means twice as much damage. Actually, it's probably more than twice as much damage. Sabin is really good in this game. And now I need to remember where to even go next. Oh, right, Nakia, which also has a bunch of really good equipment. Everything is so expensive, and I'm so poor. And now I am less poor, and fully outfitted for the next few fights, because I have a lot to get through. Shiny Edgar is walking around and must be coaxed into taking a boat to the next town over, then coaxed into getting on with the quest, and it's into the South Figaro Cave, which leads into the basement of Figaro Castle, for the next boss fight against Room Tentacles. Each of these tentacles is a little different, has slight variations in their elemental affinities, inflicts different statuses. Really the only thing I needed to be sure going into this fight is to make sure both Celeste and Sabin have Hermes sandals equipped. These apply auto haste and make the target immune to slow. This means the tentacles cannot grab either Celeste or Sabin and potentially end the fight very quickly. Edgar has no such protection, but that's fine. Sabin and Celeste are more than equipped to handle this fight on their own. And after that, Edgar joins the party and I am once more bound for Kefka. Here we can recruit Setzer, probably the worst character in the game, but he is required to get the airship again. And naturally there is new equipment in the shop to purchase, so it's time to do more money grinding. Woo! Seriously, I never realized how tight money could be in this game until I had to actually buy things. Or anything, actually. Anyway, once money is acquired, it's time to hop into Daryl's tomb, navigate through, and it's time for the next boss, Dullahan. And the fight starts off so good, with level Question Holy and a quick spell taking out Edgar, which is not ideal. I can try to resurrect Edgar, but it is a bit of a struggle when I keep using Runic at the wrong time. There we go. Edgar also has the advantage of the Dragoon Boots to be able to jump, meanwhile Celeste spams Runic at every opportunity to stop Dullahan's considerable spellcasting. And Setzer sits around doing nothing except occasionally casting Cura to heal the party a bit. Dullahan does have spells that can bypass Runic, but the most dangerous spell, Northern Cross, importantly, does not. Ooh, that's really bad timing for my party to all be busy. Is this a party wipe? It sure looks like one. On the other hand, I do have Raise on everyone. Okay, yeah, party wipe. In retrospect, I should have gotten more money, so level Question Holy didn't target Edgar and Setzer, but this should be fine. The real problem ended up being Celeste stopping her Runic spam to heal, so no more of that. I need Celeste to do literally nothing else. If the boss gets off a Northern Cross, I lose. Could also be bad if she dies. Okay, at least Celeste has pretty good magic evasion. That is very helpful for keeping her alive. Honestly, what I would really love is dealing more damage. My equipment is up to date, but I'm really starting to feel the lack of Magicite level up bonuses. Okay, there we go. Dullahan down. That was very slow. But it gets me the airship, and my next stop off is Miranda, because they sell really good armor here. And then it's over to Jadur. The mansion here is very haunted, and I need to deal with it. So it's next boss time. The Charnook is a boss that switches between Hot Lady and equally Hot Man form. The biggest problem here is that it has access to the Charm spell, which cannot seem to be cured by any means and causes the character to really cause problems. Especially when that character is Edgar, who basically solos the entire party by inflicting Confuse. So that's not great. Let's try that fight again. The good news is the boss is weak to fire, and both Sabin and Celeste have fire weapons. Charm can also be solved by bashing the character unconscious and then resurrecting them. It's not a quick process because my damage is not great, but it is effective, and certainly better than letting a character run amok and kill my entire team. But wow, this fight is taking a while. Usually Sabin would be dealing like 3,000 damage by this point thanks to a lot of strength bonuses. That is not the case here. I am really concerned about what that lack of stats is going to make the final bosses look like, but that is a later me problem. Shadownook down and Realm in the party, her sketch ability is worthless, and she can't actually learn any good magic because of my lack of Magicite. Really, the only reason I recruited her is to then fly over and recruit Strago. And before I can get into the final fights, I need to ramp up my efficacy by a lot, which means getting some of the really good lores for Strago. So it's over to Tamasa to chat with the village elder. Actually, quick detour. It's time to head to the Zone Eater's belly. Navigating this area safely gets me to the Mimic Gogo, and Gogo can mimic other characters' unique commands. The usefulness of this is usually limited a bit by Gogo's bad stats, but those stats look less bad when no one has any Magicite stat bonuses, so it should still be good. Then to this cave, because Shadow needs to be saved, which means 2 separate fights with Behemoth Kings. These rely on fairly weak physical attacks and magic spells that can be stopped by a runic, and while my damage is trash, I'm just not taking any actual damage. Okay, that was a decent amount of damage on Realm. Other than that, I'm taking very little damage. Then over to the Colosseum, wager some junk, and beat Shadow in a 1v1. That means Shadow is back in the party, which is great. His throwable should be very useful. Okay, now it's time to learn some lores. First up is Razor Gale from a Sprinter. Yes, this does in fact take way longer than it had any right to. Then Arrow from this bird. I'm not actually sure how useful any of these will be, but we'll see. Next up, I need to find a Landray, cure it immediately so it doesn't die, then do a little sketch to get Mighty Guard, which will absolutely be essential for some of the upcoming fights. And it's into Abbott's Rock for the final-ish piece of the puzzle. First, grab a bunch of coral to feed to a treasure chest, then a boss. Hidone comes with 4 Arabises? Arabai? 4 of these things. So first goal is to kill all but one of them, which is actually pretty easy. And then I just need to kill Hidone. Celis' runic continues to be the MVP of the challenge by stopping Hidone's magic. Oh wait, I do need to kill all of the little minions. Hidone then unleashes Grand Delta, a very strong lore that Strago now has access to. Hidone is undead, so a Phoenix down resolves that little problem. Oh, Tamasa saw some very good equipment, especially better throwables for Shadow. And that's kind of it. As usual, there are other things I could do, but absent any new lures I need and no more shops to unlock, all that's left is to do a little bit of grinding to get the party up to level 40. That done, it's into Kefka Tower, and that means dividing up my party into 3 groups. A team, who is good, B team, who is okay, and Setzer, who is going to be running from literally every encounter. And it would seem I messed up the teams because there is no chance Setzer could take out the first boss by himself. I have a feeling this area is going to be very annoying. I head back in, and I still did the parties wrong. I'm so stupid. At least Grand Delta deals good damage. It doesn't matter, because this party is way too weak to win this fight. Okay, we're going to be skipping a lot. Suffice to say, only my main party has the stats, equipment, and setup to actually fight any of the bosses here. And yes, that does in fact mean that I need to enter, leave, and re-enter the dungeon many times. Because the idea of this dungeon is that you would face different bosses with each of your parties. I'm not really able to do that, and while this is annoying, it is still faster than the alternative. So I will be skipping all of that switching characters around. Just know it happened, it was annoying. Oh, I wrote that whole paragraph, pretty sure this party could not win this fight, and they really should have gotten bodied, and to be fair, they kind of did. Gogo got dropped at least a dozen times, but having everyone have decent healing, combined with Grand Delta's damage, was actually enough to get through this. Wild. And the next fight up is the Guardian, which is actually an easier fight than the last one. Mighty Guard reduces the damage it can deal by a lot, and while Realm only has Cura, she also has a pretty decent magic stat, and this boss has a much lower magic resistance, so Grand Delta is doing pretty good damage. Anyway, everything I said about switching parties about was very true, but I guess it was only true for the Triad fights, so that will still be happening. B-Team just managed to be a bit more capable than I expected, but Demon is where the buck stops. Demon is just way too fast, Metal Cutter deals way too much damage. No, we're done here. Time to pop over to A-Team for the Goddess fight. Usual strategies apply. Grand Delta can deal about 9,000 damage per cast. Fuma Shurikens are weaker, but still deal about half that. Goddess deals a lot of damage and appears intent on killing the left half of my party. Okay, there we go. Party is back up, ready to fight, and... Okay, having a boss able to deal 3,000 damage with a single attack is very not good. Definitely time for Celeste to use Runic. Also, White Wind ignores the fact that this is a pincer attack and can heal my entire party. Interesting. I forgot how iffy this fight can be when you don't have really good magic evasion. And the good magic evasion is not really on purchasable gear. Hopefully that won't become an issue. Cough. Okay, first of the Triad dead, and that was spicy. Back in with rearranged parties, and it's time for the Fiend fight. And yeah, the boss opens with violence in its heart, specifically against Shadow for some reason. I've swapped out Sabin for Go-Go because having a second lore user is just too valuable to pass up, especially when Sabin was doing very little damage. Celeste is back to her primary role of using Runic to stop magic, while Shadow and Strago use Fuma Shurikens and Grand Delta for damage. Meanwhile, Go-Go can focus on Mighty Guard for defense and White Wind for healing. Wow, that fight was very quick. Back in, and it's Demon time. Same role as last time, Fuma and Grand Delta for damage, Go-Go for defense and healing. Runic won't actually help that much in this fight because Demon doesn't actually use that much runicable magic. So instead, Celeste is there to help with healing. White Wind doesn't do anything if Go-Go doesn't have a lot of current HP. Ooh, spicy. This boss is dealing a lot more damage than I prefer. Southern Cross is no joke. Okay, there we go. Party's back up. Let's resume dealing damage. Okay, Shadow, come on. That Firaga didn't even hit that hard. Wow, Shadow must have, like, no magical defense. Anyway, thankfully, after a lot of reviving, curaing, and white winding, the fight is in fact a victory. Triad destroyed, boss rush completed, which means all that's left is Kefka. So let's arrange the party, same format as before, but I actually have to think about non-active party members and arrange them in order of probable usefulness. Okay, elemental scrolls are not nearly strong enough. Fuma Shurikens it is, same strategy as before. Shadow and Strago deal damage, Celeste and Go-Go focus on defense and healing. At least I have Osmos on everyone, that way MP will not be a problem, but it's very important no one end a phase of this combat dead. Okay, first phase done, not too bad. Second phase also should not be too bad. There are 4 targets and, oh, Northern Cross, that's real bad. Especially because of the order of spells the boss used. Even if Celeste had used Runic, it would have stopped Firaga and let the Northern Cross through. I forgot this boss could do that. So Northern Cross can't otherwise be stopped. Celeste can't spam Runic in this fight or I'll die to other attacks. Let's just try it again and hope I get really lucky with magic evasion. Okay, that is an improvement. Celeste didn't get frozen, so she can keep the party alive long enough for Frozen to wear off. Because there's not otherwise a cure for Frozen? Remedies do nothing, and I have no fire spells. Okay, that is one of the enemies in this phase dead. I'm still very much not in a good position, and the boss does not stop spamming very dangerous spells, but progress. Oh, alright, well, this is not working. And we're back! This time I have switched around my equipment to give each of my usable characters as much magic evasion as possible. This has costs in that all of their defenses are a bit lower than they otherwise would be, but I really don't have a choice. Northern Cross is basically a death sentence without evasion. Phase 1 proceeds more or less as normal. I'm taking a bit more damage per attack, but the real downside is the damage. Those numbers are so bad, but I just don't have a choice. If I can't evade a good chunk of spells, my better damage won't actually make that much of a difference. Then it's into phase 2, the problem phase. Good news, I'm starting to evade some spells, which is making healing a lot easier. Bad news is that bad damage is rough. The reduction also means my Cura healing is worse, since Celeste doesn't have 2 magic boosting accessories. Northern Cross, and only Celeste was affected, that's way better. And then Strago gets stoned, and Go-Go gets frozen. Okay, we're back. Looks like Southern Cross deals fire damage, which means it hurts, but also helps a little. Okay, only 2 bits of the boss left, this is going better, if considerably slower. Once only 1 segment remains, it's really about making sure my party is in as strong a position as I can. Okay, 2 characters weakened, but no one died, so I can recast Mighty Guard, get some healing out. I need to take out the rear target as it can cast White Wind, which is very significant healing. And then only 1 portion of the fight remains, which does make this phase a lot more dangerous. Time to mass heal and just sort of hope. I can't do anything about Doom, so I just need to mitigate it. And once the final section dies, it's all about hoping I don't get completely wrecked and... shoot! Go-Go dropped by Repose, which means they are out and Sabin is in, which means I am considerably weaker. Kefka starts with a Heartless Angel, which is so good. Nice thing is, I at least still have Strago for good healing and defense, and while Shadow is weaker, Kefka is only a single target, so the Fuma Shurikens are not too bad. Okay, Forsaken and okay, that wasn't bad. Oh lord, I forgot how rough Kefka's physical attacks were. He really should not be able to deal 5,000 damage per attack. And while Strago is pretty good at keeping the party alive, he is struggling to do so and restore any of his MP. Combined with Kefka continuously killing a character, I then use Runic instead of Kira, meaning Strago dies again, and oh thank goodness that Shuriken killed. I used Runic 3 times in that fight when I didn't even mean to. And that was Final Fantasy VI, beaten with only shopping. And would you believe that not having access to Magicite, the game's primary method of character improvement, was impactful? Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, the endgame equipment I couldn't get also was a big deal, but the Magicite was probably more holistically impactful. But I will have more to say about that in the summary video, out in a few weeks. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos, so if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone, and will remain that way. For now, if you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.